Day 1251 of the Ukrainian war map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 1,050,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,000 in the past day. Then as for hardware, 4 tanks, 1 APV, 14 artillery, and 1 multiple launch rocket system, a TOS-1A at Pokrovsk, which I'll show you shortly. But now to the map, and where there is no rest for the wicked, the Russian war machine that is, as another wave of one-way UAVs flew into the country overnight, with roast in Rostov that saw UAV strikes occurring in the southwest of the city at Rostov-on-Don itself, and with initial reports stating that a Russian military facility was hit, leading to this fiery debacle. Very little information has been published since then, which, generally speaking, does go some way to indicate that the Rostov governor is attempting to downplay the true extent of the damage. Then on the map to St. Petersburg, again, a location that hasn't really become fully accustomed to Ukrainian drones, but things are changing fast. Starting off earlier this morning, due to a long-range fixed-wing AFU drone attack, reportedly involving more than 10 Ukrainian drones, the plane with Kremlin spokesperson Peskov was delayed for several hours at the time of its departure from Moscow to St. Petersburg. And no surprises here, St. Petersburg airports were shut down, causing the Peskov trip delay. At this rate of drone sorties, Russian air travel in the big cities will become, well, just like Ukraine, a thing of the past. Then swinging back on the map to Volgograd momentarily, and coming back to the series of attacks that caused significant disruptions to Russia's transportation backbone from yesterday, because alongside the additional new images of the railway attacked, which corresponds with the electrical substation that was in the throes of sustaining heavy damage resulting from the fires, the Ukrainian government has now officially commented on these military activities to state that the precise targeting of Russia's logistical networks is essential in countering Putin's aggressive actions. But why now? Why after so long? Well, the focus on the Russian railway supply network is a relatively new strategy and development in this war, following on from the lesser evolved Ukrainian strike capabilities of last year, hence the delay in these types of operations. But now, as the AFU and its longer-ranged strike capacity has now improved, and for the reason that the timing is critical, given that Russia has made it abundantly clear that it considers this summer as an important offensive campaign opportunity. So then we see Ukraine's move to effectively utilize these enhanced aerial strike proficiencies as designed to disrupt Russian supply lines and command centers, thereby weakening Russia's operational momentum in the process. Now to Ukrainian Sumy, where the stories never end. For instance, in a series of turning events, one such story is about how Russia's one-village gamble turned into a two-village defeat, as we now know that Russian commanders from this sector had devised a plan to retake Andrivka, a village that Kyiv had recently reclaimed on the Sumy front. But the twist? Those commanders turned out to be clueless about the fact that the village was already fully under Ukrainian control, prompting them to send wave after wave of reinforcements, only to turn what should have been relief missions into chaos and destruction, and littered with burning invader motorbikes many a time. And right as Russia was depleting its forces in futile rescue attempts of the already fallen Andrivka, Ukrainian troops were preparing coordinated strikes on the nearby village of Kindrativka. As such, the sheer absence of any meaningful Russian intelligence assessments on these occasions severely undermined their efforts to advance in Sumy. Technically speaking, Russia did send plenty of brains into this front, but they were attached to the soldiers that were walking into a completely hopeless outcome. Then to take a look further down the map, at night, Ukrainian drones struck targets in Dovzhansk of Luhansk, close to the internationally recognized border, with a smoke plume that that can be seen in the area due to an impact of the event. At least one of these drones showed itself to be another of the Russian Shahed drone-like designs, which Russia would surely have to accept that episodes like this feels like a karmic twist of fate in seeing these inbound UAV types targeting their military installations. Next, and moving across to the Serebryansky forest, where the Ukrainian army continues to make progress, taking control of the heights to become just 2 kilometers south of Dobrova, that's the 53rd Mechanized Brigade, and near about 1 kilometer west of the same settlement, that being the 63rd Mechanized Brigade, making recent advancements on this front over the past 2 to 3 days, taking the initiative on a front that Russia has been more or less stagnating at for the past many months to years. Then to Pokrovsk, with the Russian army who has over the many months been incrementally expanding their area of control over this aspirational summer offensive target, with their overall coming into the school of hard knocks when heading directly into the town itself. As such, the Russian army's main strategy in this sector is to leverage their northeast salient 12 kilometers away from the main town, and at a time when Russia took a 2 kilometer square chunk of land west of Popov Yar in the past 24 hours. But at the same time, and just a few hours ago, it's been reported that Ukrainian forces have liberated Razino as part of another counterattack, which would be a move that would place further pressure on Russian defenses in the salient push. Now, let's just say that Russia is to continue its expansion of this sector unopposed. The outlook for Ukraine would be one of falling back into the new lines of defense at 5 to 15 kilometers away, depending on the location, which is part of an intricate web of trench networks that has been built over the past 18 months. But as of now, it's a hypothetical pullback, and certainly not reached that level of caution by the AFU so far. Then, somewhere within this sector was the case of a Russian firing crew with a now extremely rare TOS-1A that was spotted while retreating from its firing position, and given the Russian rocket launcher's range limitation, with most of them only able to operate between 6 to 10 kilometers, usually 6 Ks or less than 4 miles from the front line, which is child's play and easily within the range of modern Ukrainian FPV drone operators who successfully tracked this one down and destroyed the rather obsolete system during its withdrawal. Now to take a look around the map, and where Russian recon drones thought nightfall would cover their tracks, but the 110th Unmanned Systems Battalion had other plans and disabused them of that notion. Next up seen was a Russian mobile drilling rig, the PBU-100, a transportable drilling platform mounted on a Kamaz truck, used for various engineering purposes, was also destroyed somewhere along the front lines. Then next to Belarus, or even further, as a drone from Belarus has again entered Lithuanian airspace. Spotted over the capital, Vilnius, residents reported the incursion early this morning, noting that the UAV was flying about 200 meters above ground, and with this event now marking the second drone incursion in Lithuania this month. Back on July 10th, a Russian Jabera drone designed to overload air defenses was also seen off course in Lithuanian skies. So another drone, another breach, but is this just poor navigation, or is something more calculated unfolding here? A test of NATO's eastern flank perhaps? Either way, nothing is worse than an annoying neighbor. Now to the news, with the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio revealing President Trump's growing frustration with Russia over the Ukraine war. Despite seemingly productive talks between Putin and Trump, Rubio stated, "It has never led to anything," quote unquote. This has been where Trump has already suspected Russia is stalling and has issued a 50-day ultimatum for peace, warning of severe sanctions and or tariffs if ignored. Now that was on July 14th, which means we are down to day 36 now. And when it reaches the final day, we will see see, not that much changed in Russian foreign policy. A fair enough assessment, given that, meanwhile, the Kremlin put out a statement as per spokesperson Peskov speaking on the matter, where he ultimately stated, quote, "The topic of resuming bilateral relations between Kyiv and Moscow is too theoretical a question right now. First, we still need to resolve the problem and we need to fulfill the objectives of our special military operation." End quote. A statement which shows that Moscow continues to reiterate its stance that achieving its military goals of taking Ukraine takes precedence over immediate diplomatic engagements, and only then would they re-enter bilateral relations with Ukraine. But they just had direct talks with Ukraine last week, July 23rd, and over 3 months. So their consistently inconsistent messaging should go some way to reveal their true nature to all interested parties, insert image of Trump here, as they're backpedaling out of even the show of direct talks with Ukraine into the future now. Then headed across to a Russian hardware update. This is a good one, where the bottom of the Russian armored fighting vehicle refurbishment barrel has been reached, as a new Russian vehicle just dropped two, in fact, the PT-76 and the BTR-50. Both first entered service in the 1950s, in 1951 and 1954 respectively, and truly a sign of their emptying war chest, Soviet war chest stockpiles. Something else to flip into a river, basically. So it turns out Russia's secret weapon is nostalgia. At this rate, expect the Tsar tank to make a comeback any day now. Meanwhile, in Russian hardware adjacent news at least, and in good follow-up to the previous segment, as new data from the Kyiv School of Economics indicates that Russia has depleted its vast Soviet-era weaponry stockpiles since its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, causing the flow of military goods to the front lines to revert to pre-2022 levels, referring to the lesser-equipped Donbass invasion days. So I think that's something that we can all agree is the direction that things are heading in. And not just heading in, but racing well into by now, but hardly with a Russian tank or armored vehicle. Then headed across to a quick funny to round off the video today, as following the latest US-EU trade deal talks, Russian nuclear saber-rattler, unclever drunk, former president and deputy head of the Russian Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, has said on the matter that Trump has destroyed Europe, as the trade agreement reached with the European Union is, as he puts it, utterly humiliating for Europeans, as it brings only benefit to the United States. But in saying so, completely missing the irony that Russia doesn't even have anything much of an opportunity to partake in trade deals with most of the West and beyond, which results in them paying anywhere between 2 to 10 times the cost of sanctioned goods that they receive via back-end sanctions evading channels. So on the one hand, you've got two parties making a deal, the US and EU, and then on the other hand, you've got Russia that doesn't have open access to global markets and somehow completely misses the reality, Medvedev in this case, of how his own country's economic vulnerabilities ultimately erodes its capacity for long-term growth and stability. There really is little hope for the country of Russia. It's almost as if they're self-destructing, in denial, with their heads buried deep in the ground. Good luck with that. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe if not already. Thanks once again for all of the support, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!